just by this canal in Cheshire. It's an absolutely gorgeous day today. You can see this on the camera, but there's a whole bunch of swallows which are just dipping over the canal. So it's absolutely gorgeous. But what I've been thinking about was to do with something I've spoken about in a few of these videos, to do with how sense data turns into experience. Oh, the train going past. By which when I talk about sense data turning into experience, what I mean is that there seems to be certain cognitive procedures, relatively stereotypical or routine or innate or whatever, however you want to describe it, procedures that do certain things to the information that comes in through our senses. So I've talked before about things like cognitive operators or about agency detectors. The various names that these procedures have been given. But what I've just been thinking about was in terms of the relationship that the kind of more gross aspects of our embodiment, and I don't mean gross in a negative sense, just the kind of facts of our embodiment before you get to the sense level already enacts a kind of editing process on the data of the world. Because certainly the material that comes in through my senses is a tiny proportion of the material and the data that's actually out there in the world. The information, if you like, that's out there in the world. My eyes can only respond to certain wavelengths of light. My ears can only hear a certain pitch, range of sounds. I can only I've got a very limited olfactory sense, very limited tactile sense. I mean, it's exciting and engaging and all those things, but definitely constrained. And even things like my experience of distance, my kind of spatial awareness, and indeed my experience of time, my temporal awareness, are conditions of this particular kind of embodiment, the size at which I operate, for example, or just the way that bodies are in the world as physical objects are seen to be existing in a three-dimensional space and kind of proceeding through time in a linear way. At least I kind of feel it. But I know, many theories of physics say there are much more than 10, 11, 21, whatever numbers of dimensions. That time is the same kind of a dimension that space is, or rather space and time are linked. I kind of know those things academically, but I don't have any sensory access to all that stuff. In fact, in terms of space and time, I think Kant talks about those things as being effectively senses. It's the way that our senses... No, it's not the way our senses. It's the way that the fact of our embodiment organise the information of the world prior to our experiencing it, or formative of our experience of it. So even before the senses kick in, even before all this information flooding through my eyes hits my visual cortex, and before the information shooting up my nose in the form of molecules and setting up electrochemical signals in my olfactory bulb, or whatever all those things, before any of that stuff can happen, there's already a huge filtration process and a huge organisational process taken place, in which most of the data of the world are discarded. Most of the dimensions of the world, of the universe apparently, are collapsed or not brought into existence in the first place, something like that. Most of the electromagnetic spectrum either passes straight through me and doesn't touch the sides, or else doesn't reach me in the first place somehow, or operates outside of my range of ability to detect. So the experience that I'm having, and all human beings are destined to have, isn't just a condition of the relationships between the sense data coming in and the cognitive process of which are enacted upon that sense data. It's also partly a product of the kind of raw embodiment which filters out most information in the first place. So that translation that I think it was John Wheeler talked about, the translation of bit to it, of the bits of information that constitute the world, to the it, the objects and events and entities that constitute lived experience. That journey from bit to it. The first stage in that journey is a journey of shedding of most of those bits, the culling of most of those bits, and the excising and editing out of almost all of that experience. I don't know what percentage, but it must be a very, very high percentage of possible information that's edited out before it even touches our senses. And it's only that little bit that gets through, which I think Dawkins talks about actually in one of his books. He talks about it being a little slot, like a letterbox, like the slot in the burqa, I think he says, that you look through. It's only that tiny bout of information that's subsequently organised by something like cognitive operators, like something like agency detectors, acted upon in ways that allow us to express those things and create this hugely rich experience that I'm having right now beside this canal in Cheshire. Amazing.